This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Another concern that people have from the Monday night game is the Browns defense. A lot of people are wondering, like, what happened to this defense, right? Because last year they were a very strong unit, and this year they're not a bad defense, but they're not a trustworthy defense, right? Like the Browns defense will play well, and then right when you need them to, they start to let the opponent drive. So what's going on here with the defense, right? What are the main problems that can be fixed? Is it a personnel thing? Is it a coaching thing? Is it somewhere in between? When I look at the defense, the first thing I start to wonder is, hey, is this a grouping of personnel that the Browns have on this roster that maybe, just maybe, does not do well when they try to add a ton of complications to the defense? Because this is the second time I've lived through this with this core of defensive players. If you remember, in 2021, the Browns defense was pretty solid. That was the 1 year Joe Woods had where we were convinced that he might be decent, and that defense was solid. The offense was awful that year. That was the year that Baker Mayfield tore his labrum. But we thought to ourselves, man, that defense is solid. If that defense doesn't stink, well, if that offense doesn't stink, this team had a chance to do something. And then the year after, in 2022, the defense completely fell off a cliff. Now, a couple of things happened, right? The Browns' interior depth went to hell. They lost a couple guys in free agency, and they had multiple injuries along the interior of the defensive line, and that caused a ton of problems, right? Like Perrion Winfrey, I think that's the year that he got kicked off the team. All of that stuff kind of went down, and that hurt the depth of their defense. But another thing that was going on a lot is a lot of miscommunications and trouble in zone. Now, you fast forward to 2023. Joe Woods is gone. Jim Schwartz is in. Browns run a very simplified version of what they're running, and they're dominant. You fast forward to 2024. They try to add to that, and they're not as dominant. I think at this point it's fair enough to ask the question, hey, is this just not a unit that can handle adding these complications, or not handle? I think that's the wrong way to say it. So let me rephrase this. Is this a unit that is just better when they're playing on instinct versus trying to add all these intricate features to the defense, right? The Browns defense is very, very talented and very athletic. And I think allowing them to rely on that talent and athleticism is a better strategy than trying to add features to this defense that kind of takes them away from all of that, right? Like the complaints that we have are usually when they have players who are really good at one thing not doing the thing that they do anymore. Like a lot of people were complaining last year that the Browns defense is predictable. And that's a fair complaint. Browns defense was fairly predictable, and top-tier teams with top-tier quarterbacks were able to pick that apart about the Browns. So all offseason, what we want the Browns to address is being predictable. But see, that's a consequence. There's a consequence to being less predictable that I don't think a lot of people thought through. Because if you're less predictable, what does that mean? If you run man a lot, you got to run less man. You got to run more zone. That's the trade-off with being less predictable. My question is, was that trade-off worth it? Like, are the Browns being less predictable? Is that better than them just being predictable but doing what they're really good at all the time? It's kind of like Mike Tyson, right? Like, if you go back to when Mike Tyson was good, Mike Tyson was predictable. Like, he didn't do nothing crazy in his match. He wasn't like Floyd Mayweather where he going to hang around for 12. Mike Tyson going to peekaboo, 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 get close to you and try to hit you in the face as hard as he can. It's a very predictable strategy from Mike Tyson. But it was a very effective strategy. Now, if Mike Tyson got in there and people were telling him, oh, no, you got to add a weave game and you got to add all of this, and then now he's doing all that stuff instead of just doing what he's good at and he's winning less, you got to ask the question like, hey, did we just complicate this too much? That's my thought about this defense. It feels like we keep pulling them away from doing what they're really good at when it's been demonstrated that they're really good at just doing the simplified version of this. Yeah, they'll run zone. Obviously, you're going to run zone more often, depending on what the situation is. Yeah, you're going to be a little predictable. But the question is, do you think you're good enough in man that doesn't matter as much? Because what I've seen is that they're so bad in zone, and like it's not just Jim Schwartz. These players, okay, I've seen them be bad in zone with different defensive coordinators who specialize in zone, like Joe Woods. I've seen it, and I just think we're overthinking it. We want to add all this stuff to the defense, and it sounds good on paper, and it sounds good in press conferences, but really is it what's actually best for this team? This team is at their best when they're just going one-on-one, man-on-man, because they got Myles Garrett and they got Denzel Ward. Another question about this, now that I'm on corner, is Martin Emerson. He has had a bad year this year. And my question is, how much do you react to that? Players have off years sometimes, right? Like that's just a fact of life. That happens. Some players just have a down year. Is it just a Martin Emerson down year, or are we discovering something more nefarious here with Martin Emerson? Is he getting exposed, right? I think he's having a down year. He's looked off physically all season. I've been like searching and digging to see if like there's an injury there for Martin Emerson. Because like to me, when I watch him, he looks like an injured corner, but there's apparently no injury there with Martin, but something's going on with him, right? Something that I expect to be cleared up by next year, but he's clearly not playing with the same confidence he did last year. He's clearly not playing with the same aggressiveness he had last year, the same level of strength that he did last year, or physicality that he has the last couple of years. I think he's having a down year. I don't want to overreact to that and like all of a sudden say Martin Emerson's trash. I'll give him a year to play better, because also we've done this with like Denzel Ward before, where Denzel Ward has an off year and people freak out and get super reactionary about that and tell me that Denzel Ward needs to be cut. The Browns need to trade Denzel Ward. All of this ridiculous, goofy nonsense. And then like the next year, Denzel Ward ends up being one of the best corners in the NFL like he is right now. So I'm not going to react too harshly to Martin Emerson's down year. I just think that that's probably a symptom of the problem I talked about earlier, right? Where the Browns wanted to kind of switch it up and change it up and be less predictable and do more sim pressure and all of this, but it's taken them away from what they do very well. Like the perfect example of this is during a play last night, the Browns sim pressed. And when I say sim pressure, let me explain that because some people might not know. Sim pressure is when you make it seem like you're going to send 6-7 guys on the line of scrimmage to blitz the quarterback, but then you drop like 5 of them back and it's just a 4-man rush. The good thing about sim pressure, it can confuse quarterbacks. The bad thing about sim pressure is, in order to play that guessing game of who's coming, who's going, you do stuff like drop Myles Garrett in coverage. And no disrespect to Myles Garrett, obviously a great athlete, somebody who, if he really wanted to be good in coverage, I'm sure he could be fine in coverage. But in what world is Myles Garrett in coverage better than Myles Garrett rushing the passer? Like, even if they know Myles Garrett's coming, I just would rather have him rushing the passer every time, right? It's one of those things where it's like you get too complicated for your own good. This Browns defense has very good personnel. I think the game should be simple when you have good personnel. Just attack. Let the guys do what they do well and do it often, and just attack that way. I don't think you need to be less predictable. I don't think you need to be super complicated. I don't think you need to be doing all these cute little intricate zone looks and match buzzes. I don't think you need to do all that. You have a team with good personnel. Let them do what they do best, because I think Martin Emerson's down here is partly because they overloaded him with all this other stuff. And now he can't be free to be instinctual, free to play the way he wants to play. So for me, defensively, the biggest fix for me, simplify. Get back to basics. Why are we trying to add all this stuff that makes us more complicated, that maybe, people see on a film breakdown and give you some props about, but functionally it makes you worse? Like, yeah, is man coverage predictable? But like, yeah, Denzel Ward consistently being in man coverage, oh, that's super predictable. But guess what? It's also super hard to beat because that's Denzel Ward. Myles Garrett sending him to the quarterback every snap, that's so predictable. But guess what? It's hard to stop because it's Myles Garrett. Who cares if it's predictable? You feel me? Like, I think that's the thing that the Browns focused on in the offseason, and they were really worried about being predictable, but nobody once asked, did it matter that they were predictable, though? Like, I don't think they lost that game in the playoffs to the Texans because they were predictable. I think they lost that game in the playoffs because they just didn't play well. Like, that had less to do with predictability and more to do about holding up to your bargain as a player. But hey, they blamed it on predictability. They tried to do all these things to be less predictable. And now they're less predictable for sure, but they're not better. So what's the point? Other things that the Browns need to do, they need to get bigger on the interior. This is my one thing with Andrew Berry. It drives me crazy. He loves these little defensive tackles. And like, I got no problem with Mike Hall. I think he's a good pass rusher. He's fine run stuffer, whatever it is. But we got one big beefy defensive tackle on this team, and that's Dalvin Tomlinson. And it might be possible that you move on from this offseason. We need more size in the interior for this defensive line. Just straight up. If I see them give up another draw play for like 8 yards, I'm going to lose my mind. And the reason that happens is because they're not big on the interior. Get big guys on the interior. You can keep the pass rush guys, right? You keep the Mike Halls, the Mo Hursts of the world, the Shelby Harrises of the world. I got no problem with that. But give me more than one big defensive tackle. Right now we got one. Why can't we have two? I wanted DJ Reader in the offseason, okay? Just give me two. Just give me two guys. So if the run game is going crazy, you could just put two big bodies in the interior, put JOK over top, and kill all that noise. No more running up the middle. Give yourself those options. Also, get some bigger linebackers. The emphasis on running the football has increased in the NFL meta. Linebackers need bigger ones. Need to get bigger linebackers, right? Just more size on the defense in general, but especially in the interior and the front seven. And I think those two things could really fix the Browns. I don't think the Browns need a massive personnel overhaul to get to where they want to get to as a defense. I think it's very possible they do very little defensively, and they could change things just by simplifying their approach and getting back to doing what they did well instead of being worried about being predictable or not. You could get some bigger guys on the interior. You can get somebody to play with a little bit more size. Like, I don't think you got to make major changes. Like, I don't look at this draft and say, hey, you need to draft somebody in the first 3 rounds on defense or else the defense is going to be cooked next year. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think the personnel that you got is fine defensively. The question is, can you just put them in positions to be successful again like we did in 2023? But that's my thoughts on this. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.